the High Court too.
Would you say that evidence was new and compelling evidence?
Absolutely. At the appeal, I did the wounds being 4 wounds that were actually considered wounds which punctured the lung, 3 on the right side and 1 on the left side. The one on the left side, in the appeal I wrote, I cannot find an explanation for wound number 7. However, because this man fell on top of my son, that was in the proximity of my son's hand, and I was very honest. That would have been a possibility by fact that could have happened. However, now that we have the proven situation of a neurothorax being done...
Can you explain what that is?
Yes, absolutely. When someone's stabbed, like in the right lung, the left lung was actually the lung this man was living on. The neurothorax was done on the left lung, which means then the left lung become compromised. Therefore, this man was running on 2 lungs damaged. So he would have been floundering for life, and quite so. There was always a question in my mind, and that was, how does a man live with 18 stab wounds from 5 to 10 at night till 11 o'clock at night, when wound 8 and 9 is so severe that this man would have bled out in minutes, but he was still alive? And the question has to be answered. It's not my role to answer this question. The pathologist needs to answer it. The coroner needs to answer it. And the courts need to hear it. And that wound matches a knife owned by Ashley Stott. And Ashley Stott admitted in the trial he owns that knife. Now, this is not rocket science now. We've got many factors which show wound 8 and 9 is not 2 wounds. It's actually 1 wound and done by a mauler fighting knife, which is illegal in Australia.
So what we've got is a criminal case, and there is an initial police investigation, and obviously followed up with necessary pathology reports, and then a judicial process due to the fact that there was a person who lost their life, and there was violence and weapons involved.
Mm-hmm.
So from the outset, would you say, if we start with the police, that the police investigated the crime properly, looked at all the evidence, and were very thorough in their investigations?
No. Look, as I'm reminded every time I step into a courtroom or near someone who's in the judicial system, they remind me I'm just a mum. However, there are such inconsistencies in for example, one of the forensic men walked through Unit 3 and left a knife on the ground until another group of forensics walked through and said, hey, there's a knife here, and she drove back to the police station and said, you've got to come back. She left that site and come back, and then she was sent to video the scene, not the knife on the ground she found. So they were in that unit talking about how they were going to do this knife. That is knife 77. That matches the wound in this man. That should have been important right from the start, considering that this man was stabbed and actually had died the night prior. The time was never really established, but however, they failed to pick up every piece of weapon that was on that site. And how can you walk over it? How can you not pick it up? How can you leave it for the next forensics to walk through?
Is it your contention that that particular knife was the murder weapon? The
Absolutely.
Weapon that caused the lethal strikes to the person who was deceased?
Absolutely. It hit the right lung, and it actually had impacted on the spinal bones as well, on the right lung. And it was considered by the pathologist as a major hit to the lung, other than the scissor wound and another wound, wound 11.
And that knife exists in photographic evidence?
Yes, it does.
Can you describe the Muller fighting knife?
It would be approximately 20 inches long. It obviously is a heavy knife. It's got a massive blade on it, and it's got a hilt, which is very unusual. one side of the hilt is actually shorter than the other side. So therefore, when matching the wound to the knife, it's very easy to see it is that knife, because the track wound matches the knife, and also too the hilt matches the bruising and the cut that actually exists on this person, actually to the right shape, the right size. It's unmistakable. Totally.
Let's go back a little bit and talk about, tell me the name of your son and just tell me a little bit about Adrian. Just talk about Adrian.
Right. Adrian's Adrian Wayne Smillie. He was 32 at the time that this happened. He'd prior lived in Unit 2, which was next door to Ashley Stott. Ken England lived in Unit 1 and was a trial witness to some events that happened that night at 9:30 prior to Adrian going there. Adrian's always had his animals. Adrian had a vet bill which a trial witness had gone to the trial and said that he had an argument at the Devonport RSL Club. But Adrian went in because the other two guys were drinking and said, "You've got to help me pay the vet bill." Now, that's absolutely an normal thing to ask. And it was made to be bad in the trial. It was petty, it was stupid, but it shows that Adrian cared about his animals. Whereas on the other hand, we've got two people on the other side of it who don't care about animals.
Why did he ask them to help pay the vet bill?
Because Macca's dog had bitten Lily's ear, and Lily was Adrian's dog, and it had bitten Adrian's dog's ear off. It was a very savage dog.
What type of dog was that?
It was a purebred American pit bull, but it was registered as a cross because you're not allowed to have pit bulls here in Australia from what I hear.
And this dog was owned by who?
By Ben Maxwell.
And Ben Maxwell was the man that was deceased?
That's correct.
So Ben Maxwell's dog had attacked your son's dog at some point. There'd been a fight and he'd bitten the ear off.
Mm-hmm.
And so he'd asked to pay the vet bills.
Mm.
Let's just go back a little bit. Just talk about your son just before all this. What was he like as a person? His early life, growing up with him, any problems that he had, how your relationship was with him. Just talk about you and Adrian.
Yeah, he was my first child. He was a very placid child, and he was in creche right from the start. So I went straight back to work. I think he was 2 weeks old when I put him into creche, and I went working night shift back at Edgeworth in Ulverston. So he was always around other children, and he's always been a child that hands toys over and things like that, which is not really normal, because sometimes children say, "Look, that's my toy," but Adrian would sit there and say nothing. Now, Adrian's placidness goes right through his life. These people that were here and through the trial actually stayed at Adrian's house because they were homeless. He always gave them a couch. His house was always open to anyone. So he took people in, and I think this is part of the problem. 6 months later, he's asking them to go. So I think a bit of resentment may have set into some of these people. Ben Maxwell had actually spent nearly 8 months living with Adrian in Unit 2 prior. So there may have been prior contention there. I don't know about that. But Adrian loved animals. He's always loved his animals, and he had vet bills everywhere. So I did check, and they are paid.
What kind of animals did he own?
His cats and his dog Lily. Yeah.
How many cats?
He would have had 3, but Zeb was his kitten, the one Ashley Stott put in the wash machine and tried to kill on Adrian.
So he was would you describe him as a sensitive, caring, empathic child?
Yes. At 12, Adrian changed. Adrian was wagging school. Adrian was running away from school, actually. And he described it to me that he felt like he wasn't wanted. His dad took him via the court system. And running away from school, I knew something was wrong, but he said one day, "Mum, I was down in the pump shed for 3 weeks." And he said, "I stole the beer from the house." He said, "But Dad didn't come looking for me."
What was the pump shed?
Oh, there was a dam on the property right down the bottom of the hill, apparently, and he used to go and stay in the pump shed because it was near the drive. And, you know, he was waiting for his father to come in that drive and come looking for him, that's all. He just wanted him to feel loved, I suppose. And being that I was removed from his life by the courts, I didn't have him. So for 2 years I didn't have his son. And I think it's made a big impact on him. I believe he's a child that's been so desperate to have his own family for that very reason, and to find love and some peace in that. Well, that's what we all want, isn't it? Yeah.
Would you say then that your separation from your husband and the father of Adrian was perhaps the beginning for some of his troubles?
I would say it was a massive contributing factor. But I now know that when he was 26, he came to me and said, "Mum, I've been got." And I went, "Well, what do you mean, son?" And he said, "I've been got, Mum." And I went, "What do you mean?" And he said, "At my school, he said the priest got me, Mum." And I went, "What do you mean?" He went, "Oh, Mum," he said, "I've been sodomised." And I said, oh my God, what do we do? I said, "What do I do?" And I said, he said, "I can't talk about it. So he shut me down because I couldn't actually go anywhere with it. It was terrible. But I knew then he needed help, and I'd known from when he was 12 years old, 14, I got him back from his father. He came home and he was trying suicide. We went through hell, and I reckon I went through probably 15 years of this with him. And when he was 26, he finally told me. And so I went looking for counselling for Adrian, and I knew we had to get help. But I went to the Royal Commission. Once I wrote to the Royal Commission, I had to tell my other two children. I said, "Look, Kenneth, your brother's gone through something terrible. I need to tell you that, it's public now, and I've gone public to the Royal Commission about Adrian." And he went, "Yeah, Mum, I knew." And I went, "Oh my God, why didn't you tell me?" And he said, "No, Mum, Adrian made me swear to secrecy. He didn't want anyone to know. So he made me tell him I wouldn't tell anyone."
So what was this school, and how old was he when this abuse occurred?
He would have been 12, it was 1992, and it would have happened after July and before the November. So it would have been ongoing, and he has confided now in a prison guard as to what happened in those sessions, and it's on record now.
And the name of the school?
Marist School in Burnie, Tasmania.
Was it like a religious, strict boys' Catholic school?
Yes, it was, yes. Yeah.
Do you know whether or not the offending priest was ever charged for the crime?
No, it's under the Royal Commission now. Broken Rights have helped me to come through it. They've actually phoned me back and said thank you for coming forward, because there was 2 other boys who also were hurt by this same person. They named him and they apologised to me on the phone, but the Royal Commission is still obviously going through it, because he's in jail. He doesn't get any rights to his any help, any counselling under the Royal Commission or through Broken Rights. He doesn't get any help.
So even though it's fairly much common knowledge that sexually abused children can have very troubled lives and often turn to drug abuse or stimulant abuse, alcohol abuse, crime, tardiness from school, and that it can affect their psychological development. He's not considered to be a victim in the eyes of the Royal Commission into the sexual abuse of children.
His case has been accepted under the Royal Commission, but he has no right to the process because he's actually incarcerated. Now, when he's free, he gets his right and entitlement to be part of the process, but not while he's incarcerated. That stops.
Are you allowed to mention the name of the alleged priest that's accused, even while the case is on? We don't have to do that.
Well, I've never been told. Actually, they told me who it was, and they did name him. But look, I've written it down, and it's something I can't cope with. So I actually, how do I say this? It's something I haven't coped with. So I actually don't have it on my mind, because anything that's too traumatic for me, I write it down and it's in a box because I don't want to carry it. but it's been defined as one of the brothers at the Marist College, and they acknowledge it was him, you know.
So from the age of 12 up to about the age of 26, when Adrian confessed that he'd been abused, you were doing, in essence, what most mothers are doing, which is dealing with a couple of kids, separation, and can you generally classify that he was a troubled boy, or he was trying hard, but, you know, was he difficult to deal with? Was your relationship still fairly close to him despite all this?
We got very, very close over the time because I found I had a very, not a sick son, but I had a damaged child. And plus I've always had to work being a single mum. I've never had any support from the father, not 1 cent. So I've had to work as well as try and provide emotionally for my children. So I found Adrian was wagging school, and I'd go home from work and find him sitting on top of the spa cushion doing artwork. So I told him he better get good at it because it's obviously going to be his profession. So look, there come a point where we just accepted, and he is really good with his art. But I got him to focus. He started to build cars. He actually put two old E.H. Holdens together, and he did it really, really good. He got the parts, he got the engines, and like their father's a mechanic, a diesel fitter, but never spent a day with these kids. And yet these kids were doing their own cars, restoring them, and they've done a great job. You know, Adrian's had animals. He had reared a little baby kangaroo from out of the pouch. The mother was hit by a car. He reared that little thing, and it was his kangie. So he had kangie. So, you know, he reared something when other people can't even rear a little Joey. He could do that. So he's got a gift. He really does.
Did you sense, you know, perhaps in you know, around about the age of his sort of mid-20s, that he started to get his life back on track, that he had hope and prospects?
Adrian has never had work. They were injecting him every fortnight. He hated that. So Adrian developed up a real, like, leave me alone. And every time they wanted to inject him, he'd say no. Well, where do they get to the right to pump a drug in him? And also too, if he said no, they become very strong and dominant on Adrian. So it became a bit of a battle zone where he had to have these injections, but he was told to be home every Tuesday, second Tuesday. Now, you and I don't like to be home for the washing machine repair, man. Once a year. We hate being home just for things like that. Yet he had to be home every second Tuesday. Do you know what? He hated that. He felt jailed. So
what were these injections?
They're called a depot injection, and they're fluorescent. Now, under the 2001 Royal Commission that Olivia Taggart did, she's a coroner. She actually found that during the coroner's report on, there was Mr. Newman, he was Rory Jack. There was a young boy and also 3 other people. There's a tactic that was used within the mental health system where if anyone else was in the room, they'd pull a big injection out to scare the people off so that they weren't injecting these people in front of anyone else. And I was there with Adrian one day, and they pulled this great big needle out, and I went, oh my God, that's not going into my son. And I left the room. I couldn't cope with it. And yet it had a blue fluorescent liquid in it. And it's obviously nuclear. I don't care what anyone says, but I now know that was a tactic to get me out of the room. So mental health services workers, who are ex-police officers, by the way, which I found really interesting, they are ex-police officers who leave the force and then go out being mental health services worker with these people and into their communities, and they do this.
So let's step back a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
At what point did Adrian need some kind of psychiatric or psychological assistance, and how did that initially take diagnosis form, and what was he prescribed to take in terms of medication and treatment?
Right, I've never been privy to any of that. They will not disclose any of that to me because I have questioned them. They've kept me in the dark all the way through. But Adrian was suiciding because he was he's a traumatised child, and he was definitely traumatised by something. But as you see, back then when he was young, I didn't have that answer that he gave me at 26. So now all of a sudden the pieces were put together, but it was so long after it, and they'd been injecting him for so long. And he always said he was owned by the system. He was owned by these people. His life was never his. You know, and like he said, Ashley Stott's always breaking in from next door. Mum, my stuff's going. They're carting me off to Burnie, stripping me naked, putting me in these rooms, and they're glass rooms. And he said, people are walking by, Mum, and I'm standing there naked. He said, it's disgusting. So I believe he's been treated really, really wrongly and dehumanised. It's a shocking situation. We wouldn't let that happen to you or me. Why are we letting that happen to my child?
So, just to get the context of it, basically, are you saying that at a certain age he became suicidal, or he was expressing suicidal tendencies or actions? How did the mental health services get involved? Did you call them? Was he discovered? How did they basically get him into the system?
Right, that's a question I've never got the answer to, but he was suiciding when I got him back at 14. I took him from Ulverston, which means he was going to the Burnie school. I took him to Kingston, and he was under the high school at Kingston. The teachers did share their concerns about him suiciding. So I believe he may have been reported right back then to the mental health services.
What form did these suicide attempts take?
We lived on the waterfront down there, and they're really big cliffs, and the teachers were scared that he was going to go over the cliffs. He may have drawn cliffs on photographs or pictures at school, and that's where they've tweaked to it. Knives, cutting on the wrist. So he's tried to self-harm in that way. He was hurting. Something inside of him was so damaging that he wanted it out. So, and we don't know what he went through. I do now, and now it explains a lot with what he's told one of the prison guards of what happened by that priest at that school. And
so who was it that prescribed mental health? Was he institutionalised? Was that your decision to allow, or was that taken outside of your control?
Oh, never. There was never one consultation with me. And now going through the trial things, I actually got the report from Mental Health Services. Mental Health Services told that court in that document that they continued to try to contact me. They never did. Now, I've always had a public exposure. I've done real estate. When I got Adrian back, I was a real estate. My photograph was in the paper every Saturday with my properties. It's simple to find me, you know. And my phone number was there, my mobile number was there. So I was always in the public eye, and they knew how to contact me. They were never contacting me. It's like as if they took my child and they owned him from that time on.
So you'd lost touch with Adrian at this point. He was not living with you or not in your sphere of influence.
At 14, I got him back. We went to Ulverston because he didn't want to stay in Kingston. We went to Ulverston. He wanted to go back to the Ulverston school, so I took him back there. Then my daughter started playing up, and she, by this time, would have only been, 13? And she was getting out the bedroom window and running off in the middle of the night. So I had to get her out of that situation because her friends were bad company. So I wanted to protect her. So I went back to Kingston, and Adrian said, Mum, please leave me here. So I'm paying 2 rents. I'm paying for a house in Ulverston plus a house in Kingston to keep both my children there. Now, Adrian said to me, Mum, I promise you I'll go to school. You know, I checked his record. He did go to school every day. There was no way that system should have taken that boy, but that's when they got my son. When I chose to leave my son, and he would have been 15, in that house to go to school himself. But he kept his promise to me, and he went to school, and he was doing fine. And all of a sudden, it's like he's been taken. And some people might call that irresponsible as a mother. No, if my children, I trust them, and I trust my son. And that's between me and him. It's not between anyone else. And he really did do the right thing. He really did do well. So I don't understand why, but they took him then. Yeah, I believe that's when they took him. Yeah.
Let's jump forward a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So when he grew into his early 20s, at some point he befriended, or was at least acquainted with, some male individuals that lived next door to him or close by. Can you just explain who these people were, their backgrounds, what your understanding of their relationship was between each other,
Yes.
how long they were, whether or not they were friends, and just how they just knew each other?
Right. Well, it's a small complex and it has 6 units in it. Unit 1, 2, 3 were where each of these parties that were actually all participants within this trial. Unit 4, 5 and 6 were people who heard what happened and they did speak up for the trial. Ashley Stott lived in Unit 3, Adrian lived in Unit 2 for a lot of years, and Adrian had moved out and Corey Manson moved into Unit 2, Ken England remained in Unit 1. So the situation was Ashley Stott, no matter what time of the day or night, would just enter Adrian's house. He never had any boundaries, he never had any rules. And I found it really awful. And one night I found Ashley Stott walked straight in Adrian's back door, went straight into Adrian's bedroom, was standing over my son with a knife. But that was withheld from the trial and it was discussed and was disclosed on an Arunta phone call. And in the prison, they copy every phone call you make and they transcribe them for courts. It was removed.
So how did Adrian, for want of a better term, befriend people like Ashley Stott and Ben Maxwell?
Right. Ben Maxwell needed a place to live. He moved in with Adrian. So for nearly 8 months he lived at Adrian's house. So rent-free, everything
And he was
paid.
a friend of Ashley Stott's?
Yes, he was.
So basically, for a period of how many years, they were, for want of a better term, friends, or at least acquaintances?
Yes, 8 years it would be approximately.
Living in close proximity, and
Yeah.
Ben was staying with your son Adrian.
Yes.
Was their relationship always generally pretty amiable?
No, Adrian continues to speak of Ashley breaking in and taking his stuff, and that was going on a lot of the time. But Adrian at this time was a recluse. He only stayed in his bedroom. Adrian was like an institutionalised child. He grown-up man. He only used to go down the street for his groceries. He became very isolated off. And also too, the money you get on Centrelink and stuff like that, you really don't get to do any other things. He did keep trying to fix his cars, but the cops kept pulling him up because, you know, like, you're buying rubbish, you're buying bombs when you're buying a $700 car, you know. So they do keep picking him up. So you're dragged into court for this, you're dragged into court for that, and it just keeps going. So I think that is what really got him down. So he didn't have a social life. No, he was very institutionalised actually by the time he was probably 24. Yeah.
Tell me about the backgrounds of Ben Maxwell and Ashley Stott in terms of what type of people they were, whether they had criminal records, their proclivities, and what sort of activities they got up to together and separately.
Right. Basically, there was no like camping trips, nothing like that. They were just people who knew each other. But in regards to Ben, I spoke with Mrs. Maxwell. She sat beside me at the trial. I didn't know who she was until she pulled a picture of Ben out and she showed me. And that was her son. And clearly she was a mum who loved her son, but she said he was a troubled boy. She said to me that the priest told her to tell Ben when he gets angry to go dig holes in the backyard. And she said her garden had never grown since Ben had died. So it was nice that she shared that. And also too, she actually comforted me through the trial. And Ben was one of those people that you know what people said? Yeah, he was a bad dude, but we liked him. So there you go. It's like there was a good side to Ben. As to Ashley Stott, I'm sorry, I can't see a good side to that young man in any way, shape or form. I know too much evidence of what happened within this incident to say that I'm sorry, but he's 100% guilty and he needs to answer for it. I know too much in the background of how he's actually tried with that knife, because I've seen it in Adrian's bedroom that night, and I can't shake the memory that he stood over my son while my son was asleep, and I by chance had gone there because it was a unit. I'd pushed the couch up against the wall, so I was right up against the wall. No one's seen I was there, and he'd walked past me. It was only because I seen someone come into that house and go to my son's bedroom that I walked in and seen him standing over my son, who was asleep, with a knife, and he had it up ready raised.
Did he ever, Ashley Stott ever exhibit any behaviour that suggested that he might have been, had sociopathic tendencies or sadism towards harming people and or animals?
Definitely animals, and Ashley Stott had a house which has a gateway in it into the next house behind it, Morris Avenue. The woman who lives there is a lovely lady. I actually went and spoke with her, and her cats were going missing too. So the cats were going missing. Apparently they were tied in bags, and they used to train Ben's dog to get it strengthen its jaw by putting the cats in a bag and hang from the tree. Therefore the dog reaches up and it gets the blood from the cat. So they're sadistic. And this is what they was doing with the cats. And I found also in the grass that there was a Nerf gun with a needle in it, because I went through the photos and enlarged them all. I had 600 photographs from the police. I enlarged them, and in the grass I found one. So to me that's a weapon that should have been picked up by the police that night and asked, why is this got a syringe in it, and yet it's a foam Nerf gun thing? It's just insane. But he was shooting cats. Now that's a sadistic person. It's a horrible person. That person shouldn't be on the street.
What would you say about his level of intelligence and, having dialogue with him, his general behaviour around people and yourself?
I would say he would be about probably 28, 29 now, but he'd have the speech of probably a 9-year-old boy, and he'd have the body of probably an 11-year-old boy. So he's not a very big guy. But Mrs. Maxwell said something. She said, when Stott got on the stand, she spoke to me and she said, oh, he always got Macca to do his dirty work. So that night my son was the dirty work that had to be cleaned up. So Macca was taken on Stott's little deal, and that would be to get rid of Adrian as payback, because clearly Stott got into trouble for putting my son's cat in the wash machine, and he was charged for that. And he'd just come off that on the 25th of the 11th, 2012, and yet on the 25th of the 12th, 2012, they intended on taking my son fully out. So, yeah, that was a full-blown plan to get rid of my son.
So let's step back a little bit.
Should we just stop there for a sec?
Do you need water or anything?
No.
It's really good.
Is it really? Thanks. Yeah, and there's things that it's actually coming out I've actually forgot about, wow.
The whole thing is to just, in essence, tell the story and put it in that level.
And you know something, I've forgotten about my own son. Through the 6 years, I haven't thought about him as a child, growing up. And you know what Adrian said? He said, I don't remember my childhood, Mum. We've got blanks now, Paul. This is trauma. The trauma's taken away. The good
They
stuff,
really should have gotten good help. And it's a sad thing that it's not always the case, but often the case that children that should get the help that they need don't get the help they need.
I know.
And therefore they run off the rails in whatever capacity, or become reclusive, or self-harm, or even become violent or criminal, because they simply are not getting the help. So to me, it's a salient point that should have been brought up in the trial, his upbringing, his problems, his abuse, which should have affected the outcome of the sentencing.
Oh no, they've squashed all of his abuse, Paul. They will not mention that. They will not accept that he's a child that's been abused in any way, shape or form.
Well, that's
And
got to
you
be
know
brought
what
up
I'm
in the
telling you,
appeal.
and this is the thing that really is that's what I mean. I got credit with Chief Justice Alan Blow, but I do believe that there's something worse than his
Of course, I
background.
mean, to me it's plain as day.
Yeah.
If, for instance, there was an independent psychological report where he was assessed by a qualified person and who went through his feelings, his emotions, what he'd gone through, and that was presented in court to explain his behaviour. And it's like anything. It's like if you say, well, this person probably wouldn't have done any of this stuff had it not been for this.
That's right.
Then that drastically, in most cases, they kind of say, well, we can't just say he was evil and premeditated
No.
because of these problems.
Yeah.
So in the appeal that's going to come up, that's vital that there's a full psychological assessment done, or if that can't be done because of the incarceration, at least somebody needs to present the psychological.
Do you know something, Paul? What I feel is needed is an independent body from the mainland needs to come in. They need to assess them individually outside of this state and as an outside body. I believe there's a lot to be gained by one pandering to another department here. Now, the reason I come to you, Paul, is because on one of your documentaries there was one about a psychologist, a Mr. Minahan, I believe it was in the Martin Bryant case. He was actually the treating physician for Martin Bryant and spoke on Martin Bryant. Do you realise he's the man who wrote the report on Adrian for the court? And it's false. It's a false document. And there's false declarations in it. There's statements saying that Adrian's brother rang up and told mental health services one day Adrian kicked a mailbox. So the police have turned up, injected Adrian, knocked him unconscious and put him in a police car and taken him to Burnie. Now, that's actually so inhumane. Anyone rendered unconscious should be in the back of an ambulance, not in the back of a police car. Now, through the reports, I got to hear that the police refused in the end to take him the way that mental health services wanted him to be taken by a police car to Burnie, to the mental health services there. They said no. So it was really good to hear that the police were starting to stop this business that mental health services was doing and how they were treating Adrian. It's not human. In today's world, you wouldn't hear of that. And to render someone unconscious, what is their aim? Every time you give someone an injection under an anaesthetic, you're risking life. You know, where's
Absolutely.
the consent form? Where was the consent from me? Where was the discussions with me about my son? But I would have told him all the way through. He's traumatised, and that's why they didn't want to consult with me.
Who was considered to be his next of kin or legal guardian?
He's never seen his father since he was 14, and he was back with me when he was 14. But I was never allowed to be his mother. And no one ever consulted me about these injections. When he was at school, the school at Kingston respected me, but not the Catholic school. They never acknowledged me as a mother. In fact, I went to the Catholic school in Burnie to get him on the 4th of July 2012, and the priest kept him. And my son was scared of this man. And I said, and he made us wait in a room. And I said, son, we've got to leave. There's something wrong here. And he went, no, Mum, I can't leave. He's got me $10. And I went, excuse me, son, where did you get $10? In 1992, I had 10 grand's worth of mortgages. There was no spare cash around. I was working hard to keep the motel and the restaurant paid. I was working so hard. I was doing a 20-hour-a-day job, but my children were with me all the time. And then I'd go to Burnie at 2 o'clock in the morning when I could get a carer in, and I'd do 3 hours as doing the books and payrolls for a contracting firm. So I was working around the clock to keep our motel paid for, but the motel had a house on it, the kids were with me. The restaurant when I was at Sheffield, it was 100-year-old 70 square house. So the kids had the run of the top of the whole building. You know, they were with me. But where my kids got taken by the system is so wrong, is because they just snuck in and just absolutely put their claws into particularly Adrian. I just don't get it. And they never consulted with me. They've treated me like an outcast. In fact, I read a report which said I'm apparently psychologically unfit. But that was said to me. But I went to Dr. Ian Sale, and the report was done, and the person who said it certainly wouldn't reproduce it to the court. So I know I've got a statement saying I'm fine.
Tell me about Dr. Ian Sale.
Mm-hmm. I went to Dr. Ian Sale in 1992 under a court order. My ex-husband wanted to keep the 3 children, because back in those days, the law said if one person keeps 3 of the children, they get 70% of the assets. So sitting on about $1.7 million worth of assets, mind you, the mortgage was $10,000 a month. I was paying that. So to claim the assets, he wanted to keep the children. So he had to put a case forward which showed me as bad, so he could get the custody of the kids. So I went to Dr. Ian Sale, and in there he did say to me, "You don't think you should be here, do you?" And I went, "No." And he said, "Oh, why is that?" And I said, "You're just another way of hurting me." And I was very honest and quite forthright, and I went out of his office and I sat on the stairs and cried my heart out, because I realised he was the man deciding whether I could get my children. But I got my kids back. I got them back.
What report did he write on you?
It was a report on my mental state, because it was said that, you know, I wasn't mentally competent. Now, I've struck this in the reports mental health services gave to this court. This trial had my mental health state on it. What's it to do with them? Why are they questioning the mother's mental capacity in a trial for an accused murder that he didn't do? It was self-defence. And why put that in there? Because it was strengthening their story that there was mental illness. However, if there was mental illness in our family, why didn't they give him a guardianship on the night they charged him? Why didn't they give him a person with him to go through this terrible thing? Why did they not place someone with him? I believe there's a special order they need to gain from the courts to actually interview him. Would I be right in saying that, Paul?
If your son was placed on a guardianship order of some description by the court, then it means that he has to have a third party that makes the important decisions for him, that speaks on his behalf and controls many of his endeavours. So part of that would also be communication. So for instance, the legally appointed guardian by the court, whoever that may be, is responsible for providing any information regarding the welfare of their
Yes,
charge,
yeah.
whether that's psychological, financial, just domestic living environments, all of that sort of thing. So one thing I wanted to ask you was, it seems like that you were in essence still a mother to all these kids.
Yes.
But circumstances were transpiring where Adrian had become reclusive, and that there was some involvement by the mental health services and the police in his day-to-day activities. Were you sent letters, emails, any kind of communication informing you of what was going on a fairly regular basis, what the processes were, what the determinations were? Were they saying to you, listen, this situation has occurred, therefore he has to go to an institution and we have to give him this drug? And did you have to sign, permission slips, anything like that kind of communication?
No, Paul, there was never anything. Not one phone call, not one letter. Adrian went missing a couple of times, so I phoned his case manager, which was John Loudon, and he explained to me he'd seen Adrian, so it put me at peace, because I've always been scared of him suiciding. So a couple of times I got the police to go and check on Adrian. to see if he's still around, you know, because I mean, if he's been missing for a week, like, I need to know he's okay, and because I'm worried, I've stewed, I've rang everyone else, I've, you know, at my wit's end. No, not one piece of communication. In fact, Dr. Minahan's letter that he put to the court has clearly stated that Adrian hasn't seen his father since he was 14 and his mother didn't give a fuck. F-U-C-K was on this legal document. I have never been so degraded in all of my life, and by a person with such a capacity that they should never have allowed that on a legal document. Also too, they claimed in that letter to have tried to contact me, even for the judge's report. That's not true. I'd been at the trial, I'd been to every day at the trial, and I was in Adrian's life. Adrian's phone number, my phone number was on Adrian's record at the prison. How is it they could not have rang me? And yet they went back to the sentencing of Adrian on the 5th of May saying Miss Crack was not obtainable. How dare they?
So his case manager was John Loudon.
That's correct.
He would be the first point of contact for anything to do with your son, I'm assuming.
That's correct.
And what was his level of communication with you?
It was only twice when I couldn't find Adrian. However, remember, I'm the person who was in the room with Adrian getting an injection at that time, and they pulled the big needle out, so I left. I couldn't cope with it, it was massive. But however, when I read Olivia McTaggart's report regarding the 2001 deaths in custody, that was a key factor. They found that it was a tactic used to get anyone out of the room who was in the room so they could administer the drug without that person having anyone else in the room. It was a tactic. So,
would it be fair to say that John Loudon's communications with you were virtually non-existent?
Absolutely, yes. In regards to Adrian's health, there was zero. Not once was I communicated that Adrian had deteriorated. In fact, I found him in the Bernie Spencer Hospital on one occasion, and I went in and his back had spasmed up like a cat. Now, you and I both know our spine does not go that way. Our spine is curved inwards. His spine was arched up. And I went over to the nurses and I said, "Oh my God, what the hell have you done to my son?" They went, "Oh, he's just having a reaction to the medication we gave him." And I went, "Well, fix it, do something." And Adrian said, "Mum, I've been like this for 2 days," and he was in the hallway. He did not even have a room. He had people walking by him, watching him spasm. And they had not administered the drug which reverses the effect of that. They hadn't administered it. Anyway, they come over to me and said, "And by the way, who are you?" And I said, "I'm Adrian's mother." And they said, "Oh, we thought you were his sister. That's the only reason why we let you in." And I said, "Well, I beg your pardon, why is a mother not allowed in this hospital to see my son?" And they said, "Oh, we've got a report you're not mentally ill." They said it to my face. So this not mentally ill stuff has really plagued us, and they've played it really hard to the point where, Adrian, how can he, somewhere along the line, and clearly under the electronic interview, he believed that he had some sort of mental illness. Oh, but the police deleted that, didn't they?
Let's go to the night of the murder or the stabbing. So, as factually as you can, just explain to me from A to Z exactly what happened and transpired on that night, and who was there, their names.
Right, and by fact, and as you know, I've spent since 2014, since the trial. Again, the documents, I went through it, so I speak on fact. At 9:30 at night, on fact, Ken England heard a fight in Unit 3, which was Ashley Stott and Ben Maxwell fighting. Ashley Stott was photographed that evening by the hospital with a black eye, and Ben Maxwell was photographed with a bruised left knuckle, so he was clearly left-handed. At 10 to 10, Adrian and Paula Intel, his girlfriend, went down to pick up Adrian's car, which he'd left there 2 days prior, and they were stopped at the front driveway of the unit complex which I call is assault number 2. What I call as assault number 1 is in Unit 3, which is Ashley Stott and Ben Maxwell. Number 2 was Ben Maxwell and Ashley Stott meeting Adrian at the front gate. Ashley Stott hopped on the bonnet of the car and was saying, "I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you." And that was documented by Miss Rintel as well. So there was a witness to that as well as Adrian. He did not remove himself, so Paula Rintel drove that car up in front of Unit 3. Ben Maxwell and Ashley Stott went inside that unit and had another fight. So we call that incident 3 because Adrian said it was so loud and aggressive, it was really bad. And he'd said to Paula, "Get out of here." So as they were exiting the complex, Adrian had pulled out first and he was in front of Paula only by a car's length. Paula was trying to actually reverse, but Ashley Stott and Ben Maxwell had come out of that unit with knives in their pockets, as seen by Paula Rintel and Adrian. And he said that to the police that night. I call incident number 4 when they got Paula Rintel. Her blood is on Adrian's shirt. Adrian claims he's seen them attack her. Incident number 4. Let's go on to incident number 5. So Adrian hesitated, and what he did was he said he's seen them assaulting her. He stopped, and as he was stopping the car, he felt himself being pulled out of his car. King hit, stabbed, knocked to the ground, which I call incident number 5, number 6 and number 7. The stabbing, the King hit, falling to the ground and being choked, number 7. So look, if you put them in the context of a numeric order, there was quite a few incidents that night that had the capacity to kill. And they should have been acknowledged as separate incidents and dealt with by both the prosecutor and the defence.
Just tell me what happened.
So Adrian was stabbed in the hand, protecting his face, so it's obviously a brutal blow at the stabbing.
Describe the injury.
It's a 3 centimetre wide injury into the webbing of his hand, and it's gone down inward, and it's gone down nearly 5 inches by the old measurement, and it's 12.5 centimetres gone down his hand. That's a massive wound, but he had his hand up. Adrian has described that the knife got stuck, so his hand went out and the knife fell out as they were going down. And then Ben Maxwell has come on top of him because their legs got twisted. Ashley Stott had slid in and given Ben Maxwell a knife to do that. So Ashley Stott played his part in that quite significantly. When they went to the ground, Ashley Stott went to the right-hand side rear of Ben Maxwell and had a right knee scrape, so that's verified by fact. And was holding Adrian's leg down with his leg. So Adrian was pinned down not only by Maxwell, full body, but by Stott on the legs. So Miss Rintel heard the scream of Adrian and had come to his aid. She come to the left-hand side of Ben Maxwell, and clearly she has a grazed left knee. So she did. The positions are absolutely verified. And she was trying to lift Ben Maxwell off Adrian. He knew that, and he's seen her trying to lift him off.
What was Ben Maxwell doing while he was on top of Adrian?
Ben Maxwell had fallen and put his right arm over Adrian's neck and was still proceeding to punch his head into the ground. Adrian had got wounds to his neck. He's actually got the back of his head, there's skin off it, so he's definitely on the gravel, and he's got bitumen in his face. And you can see it in the paper. The newspaper ran a story the next day on Adrian. When I blew it up, it even had the CSF fluid coming from his ear. So the beating to my son's brain, to Adrian's brain, was quite brutal to the point where it had busted the brain sac. And CSF fluid does leak out when that happens. So it's brutal.
What happened at that point? So Ben Maxwell is on top of your son Adrian. Mm-hmm. Adrian's been stabbed fairly severely in the hand, mm-hmm. and he's taking a very severe beating, mm-hmm. and being choked with a forearm. Mm-hmm. What happened then?
Ben Maxwell dislodged, just going back, when Adrian, and he describes it, He said, Mum, I was not breathing, I was going to die. But he said, in the side of my eye, I seen the knife that had dropped. And he said, with my bad hand, he said, Mum, I picked it up. And he said, I know I lifted my hand over. And he said, I did feel something. He said, so Mum, look, I think I got him once. He said, I felt it. So in essence, he was so honest. But I believe that his honesty for saying that has got him the whole 23 years charges. They're throwing the book at him. But they never proved that any of that knife hit or did an injury or a knife wound, but it would have been from right to left. All the wounds that are on Ben Maxwell's back that hit the right lung are actually from right to left and from the rear. There's no way he could have got to the lower back and exerted that force from the right-hand side. Only Ashley Stott was on the right-hand side of Ben Maxwell. And only Ashley Stott would have had the brute force from behind to have done wound 8 and 9 and hit that lung and the back spine.
Let's slow down on the legalities.
Hang on a sec.
Just tell us
Because
the
people are
story.
going to judge me. You know, there's an old saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and I'm scared they'll judge Adrian because of my my integrity, because of the way I'm going
Look,
forward.
people will make their own minds up about anything.
Yeah,
But
true.
one of the best, look, I'm not trying to lead anything. I think the simplest thing is to just tell the story at this stage, and then we'll get to the legal processes about how you ran the case. Right now, I just want to get
The sign.
what happened.
Yeah.
Just like
Okay.
so and so jumped on him,
Yeah.
he pushed him off, he grabbed him, there was a fight, he stabbed, dropped the knife.
Yeah.
Just simple like that.
Yeah.
So I'll go back a bit.
Right.
So Ben Maxwell is on top of your son Adrian. He has a forearm across his throat. He's pushing his head into the asphalt. And he's striking him with a fist to the face.
Yes.
At some point during that altercation, Ashley Stott hands Ben Maxwell a knife.
Yes, he'd already done that prior to them falling to the ground, but Ashley Stott was handing Ben Maxwell scissors, and the intent was to ram him in his guts, and that's what they were saying at the time. And Adrian knew that these scissors were going to be going into him, but Stott didn't hand them to Ben, and Ben didn't use them, so there was even worse to come. But Ben dislodged and went. Adrian got in the car and went. Miss Rintel followed. So they dislodged and went to 24 Chichester Avenue for safety, where they called the ambulance for Mr. Maxwell. They didn't know any injury had happened to Stott. We still don't know what happened to Ashley Stott to this day. On fact, we can't even prove it on fact, there's nothing. But they went to 24 Chichester and they waited there for the police to come, and Constable Elena Taplin was the first to turn up, who handcuffed and charged Adrian on the spot and put him to the tow ball of a car with his injured hand.
What injuries had Adrian sustained at this point?
At that point, he'd sustained head injury through the brain damage, through the brain trauma, through the king head. He had skin and scalp off the back of his head where he'd hit the curbing, so it was a massive hit to the head. He'd sustained the hand injury, throat, through the attempted asphyxiation at the final points when Adrian did react. Also too, there was the bitumen cuts to his face and stuff. So the impact and the crush that would have been done to his head at that point. So it was all head injuries and hand injury, but it was so severe.
Was there any indication that he was, despite the injuries, was clear-headed, or was there a concussion? Was there a reported concussion later on, or dizziness, or?
There is it's documented by Police Constable Schneider that when Adrian was at the hospital, apparently he was speaking in numbers. He did go into shock a couple of times and couldn't breathe, even through his electronic interview at 7:30 in the morning, when they actually did finally decide to tell Adrian that Ben had passed. He went into a fit and couldn't breathe and he was choking. But they stopped the video, so that was never ever documented. They shut it straight down.
What was his recollection of Ben Maxwell disengaging from him? Does he recall, or did he state that Ben Maxwell and Ashley Stott had walked away, staggered away, ran away?
Mm-hmm. He says as he was driving out, he's seen Ben in his rearview vision mirror, and Ben was yelling and cursing and walking. But Ben would have been really angry, so look, it would have been probably full on. And also too, Ben's toxicology report shows he was so drunk. He was massively 5 times over the limit, 0.23 of alcohol, 0.25 I believe of THCC, which is marijuana, and caffeine levels were massive. So
he was on his feet. So once again, just tell me what was seen or heard or what happened.
Yeah, he's seen Ben actually walking towards the centre of the, the complex, the courtyard. So he's seen him get up and say, get the cops.
Did he see Ashley Stott?
No, he didn't. Actually, he's never made a comment about Ashley Stott. But the other witnesses said he got up and went to the Unit 3.
So let's just stay there for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So there were witnesses that were neighbours,
Mm-hmm.
and they had witnessed the altercation.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what some of the statements they made or what they witnessed.
Right. There's
and
a
their
house.
names.
Yeah. Heather Belgale was a witness for the incident, and her kitchen window looked right out over the courtyard, and she's seen it, and she's seen a male get into Paula Rentel's car on the driver's side, and she's seen another passenger get in on the left-hand side, which would have been the passenger side. We do have Maxwell's blood on the pedals of that car, so he was in it. However, getting back to the actual witnesses, we had one in 18 Birch Street, which is a house on the other side. They heard the altercation and had phoned the police. And also to Ken England, but he was one of those reluctant to even enter out because he was just so scared of these guys. Because it was a common occurrence. They just fought all the time.
So there were, including Paula, who was Adrian's girlfriend,
there
were at least 2 or 3 people that had independently witnessed the altercation?
They heard the scream, and that's when they all come running, and they all said that, and they said it was blood curdling. So, and they all mentioned just one scream too. So, why didn't Ben scream?
So Adrian departed the scene with Paula.
Paula was behind in her car, but Adrian, I asked him this question: what did he do when he got to 24 Chichester? He said he went there and waited for Paula. And I asked him what actually, in sequence, what he did, and I said, what did you do next? And he said, I calmed Lily down. His dog was upset. So, and then Paula arrived. So, that's the sequence there.
And they called the police and waited for the police.
Yeah. He dialed the number and couldn't speak. So clearly he was in shock, whether he couldn't speak because of the injuries he just sustained, but he couldn't speak, so she spoke, and which was good.
How was it? Where was Ben Maxwell discovered deceased? And tell me about where Ashley Stott was discovered as well. So what happened to the two other people involved in the altercation?
Right, Ashley Stott was found in Unit 3, and he had wounds to the back of him, which had circular marks at the end of them. So that's strange. A knife doesn't have circular marks, whatever. Ben Maxwell was found in the middle of the complex, over between Unit 5 and Unit 6. So it was never anywhere near where the fight with Adrian had happened. So he'd got away, and then he obviously sustained further injuries over in another area, which because he would never have moved. 18 stab wounds would have been, obviously there's primary stab wounds and secondary ones, but taking it all into account, that wound 8 and 9 is brutal. That was a death wound, and that man was actually stabbed, and it would have been over there because he would have been rendered unable to walk or move. And his lung being hit would have rendered him unable to breathe, so he would have been absolutely harmed at that place.
So let's go back. So Ben Maxwell was discovered outside, lying on the concourse area, deceased.
He was alive.
He was alive.
Yes, he was alive.
So
and
just
he was
explain. Just tell me what I've just asked you.
Now he was found. Constable Bartush turned up at 10:24. He took photographs of Ben Maxwell. Then got help for Ben. He ordered an ambulance for Ben again, and clearly one come at 10:32 at night. So 10 minutes later. They worked on Ben, they tried to work on Ben, but they had to call the dog catchers in to take Ben's dog away because the dog was stopping the ambulance people from helping Ben. So clearly they had to wait for the ambulance control people to come in, the dog control officers to come in and take the dog. And that was done because I checked. At 11 o'clock at night, apparently Ben was put into an ambulance, and before he left the site, Detective Kane had contacted Constable Schneider and had said Ben Maxwell is deceased.
Was he conscious when they found him?
Yes, he was. Yes.
Did he say anything, or was he crying or screaming?
They said he was conscious the whole way through, and that he had a problem to talk, but he was telling him he couldn't breathe. Now, I know Ben, he would have been saying who did it to him. So the police have obviously not released this. So, I mean, I can't say that I wasn't there. However, if someone's going to put wounds into me like that, to my last breath, I'm going to tell them who did it. You know, I believe the police know.
What was... Ashley Stott was found wounded inside his apartment.
Yes.
So describe what people discovered when they... What happened to him, or what did people see? What kind of wounds did he have?
Right. Ashley Stott has a zigzag wound on his back. It is definite, and it's different. It's not a stab wound. It's actually got a pattern, and it's like half a diamond. And he's got 4 of them on his back, and they've got round circular bruises at each end of them. So it's either a tooth or a claw. And that would be consistent with Ben Maxwell's dog protecting Ben. And that would be consistent with probably the fact that Ashley Stott attacked Ben Maxwell. It is consistent with wound 8 and 9 being knife 77, which has got DNA.
I've got to get away from the lawyer.
Yeah, okay. So,
I'm just going to stop you when you go lawyer on me. We'll get to lawyer.
I go rogue, don't I?
So we're going to start again.
Yeah.
We'll go with close-ups and diagrams, but that comes later.
Yes.
Right now I'm just trying to get
You're
the
after
sequence
the
of what
framework
happens.
for it.
We may end up doing a recreation of the event.
Yeah.
God forbid.
I
But
thought
it's
you were
just
not-
vital to get the unadulterated story.
True. Yeah.
You know, the cop walks in the room, I saw a guy on the floor,
Yeah.
the dog was jumping around him, you know, whatever.
Yeah. Well, Ashley Stott was.
We've got
Yeah.
10 minutes on this.
Oh, okay, good. Actually, Ben was found outside and assisted. Ashley Stott was found in Unit 3, and clearly it was a crime scene. It was quite a mess. Knife 77 was found in there, but he was injured. He was injured.
Was he trying to get up? Was he conscious? Was he just lying there?
The people who attended him said he never lost consciousness the whole time they had him. So they've recorded that at the trial and said as their testimony.
Were there weapons and blood in the room?
There was a knife in front of the TV, which was very large and was not a nice knife.
What about the blood? Was there blood everywhere or just...
Yes, there was a pattern, and it was found to be in the entrance, up the stairwell in the entrance. There was flesh on one of the fence posts, and that was taken. It had a fingerprint in it. The fingerprint expert never went to the trial. He never showed up, and his evidence was never put to the trial. The blood was through the main entry where Stott was found, and also through the lounge room, but it stopped and it started again down near the bathroom. So, and there was actually a CD that was on the floor and had an actual blood droplet on it. So someone had walked past who was actually bleeding, but this was never put to the trial.
So, who do you think stabbed Ashley Stott? Or was he, or I won't say stabbed, let me put that question again. Who do you think injured Ashley Stott, and how was he injured?
The wounds are consistent with a dog claw, not a bite, a dog claw, and circular, and it's the same size as a dog claw in diameter. And I truly believe Ben's dog was protecting Ben, and I believe Ashley Stott had attacked Ben, and the dog did react. So,
Did Ashley Stott suffer any knife wounds?
they had his lung as being punctured on the left side, but the coroner said it was the same wounds as they seen on Ben. Well, no, it's not. That was just an absolutely ludicrous statement to make, and said it was consistent with the same wounding as Mr. Maxwell.
So he was stabbed?
No, the pathologist said that. I beg to differ on that, and yet he's the pathologist, but he's a pathologist that didn't even know a pneumothorax when he should have done.
So I just want to get that clear. He had wounds on his back, which I guess you could describe as superficial wounds.
Yes, one had apparently suspectedly punctured a lung. So they did do a neurothorax on him, and he's pictured in the hospital with the neurothorax tubing still in him.
So in order to puncture a lung, something would have had to have penetrated deep enough to do that.
Yes, but the hospital said they did it in case his lung was punctured. So, bit of a grey area, isn't it?
It's a grey area. So did the pathologist ever say that some kind of foreign object had entered his lung?
No, the pathologist said it's stab wounds, it's consistent with the same wounds as Ben Maxwell had.
Right.
He made a blanket statement over that. He never identified a weapon. He never identified who did it, anything like that. There was no identification made of any item.
What was the pathologist's name?
It was Mr. Christopher Lawrence.
So your son was arrested and handcuffed to the front of the car.
To the tow board.
And then what happened to him?
He was left there until Detective Kane and Detective Schneider turned up from Burnie, and then they took him for processing. They didn't allow him his ambulance. They took him for processing. Then at 1 o'clock in the morning, a female officer walked in and said, "Get that man to a hospital." So actually she phoned the hospital and got an ambulance for him at 5 to 1 in the morning.
So the two arresting officers did not call for immediate medical assistance for Adrian's injuries?
No, they didn't, but worse, they cancelled Adrian's ambulance he requested for his injuries.
So they took him straight to the
Devonport Police Station for
Devonport
processing.
Police Station.
Yes,
Was he put in a cell?
Look, he hasn't spoke of that. They photographed him, they stripped him naked. Here's a boy in shock, and let's face it, do they know what first aid is and how to treat someone who's just been put through a whole trauma? They stripped him, which means that if he went into shock, he didn't get his proper medical help, and then they put him in a little paper suit, the blue pathologist suits. So they processed him, photographed him, did all that.
Did they charge him and or interview him straight away?
No, there's no record of that. There's no record of any food being administered to him or water.
At what time did he obtain medical assistance?
It was approximately 5:45 in the morning. They took him by ambulance to Launceston, got to the Launceston hospital and just turned it round and went to Latrobe. They did not even go inside that hospital with him. So he had a trip to Launceston in an ambulance and back. So that's such questionable behaviour. So he arrived back there at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:20 I think it was, 2:30, and I've got Detective Kane actually at the morgue at 2:44 in the morning. So the time frame is there.
Not to stop.
Thanks,
I
mate.
know.
Churning through the...
We are.
They're big cars, aren't they?
Do you need a break? A cup
No,
of tea?
A lot of
no.
data going there.
Yeah, there is, isn't it? Yeah. But I mean, there's nothing much more other than the incident, Paul, really, that is really where the evidence comes from and everything, isn't it?
Well, what I'm then next going to ask is, I'm just going to get you to very simply tell me what you think happened.
Yeah, okay.
Just say, without going into
Yeah.
just say, I think this happened. I think my son reached up with his weak hand, did what he did. They disengaged, and then I went back to the apartment, and I think Ashley Stott stabbed Ben Maxwell, and they had a fight, and the dog and butt. So you just tell me what you think happened.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You don't have to back it up. Just tell me an alternate story
Yeah,
to
that's
the
right.
case,
Yeah.
and then we'll go to the legal process, and then we'll talk about the jars. There's a fair bit to get through, but we'll get there. It's just you get it out, and
Yeah. But you guys all right? You've got work in the morning. Oh, you haven't.
I'm
You're
not-
going to sleep in?
um,
Sleep-ins are going to be on, aren't they?
though I do have somebody coming around at 12:30. I'm doing an edit on a little trailer that I've got for Port
okay.
Arthur.
Oh, good, yeah. Have you got a website where you've got this on? Have you, Paul? Because I haven't found it.
I haven't put a website up yet.
No.
I've started it. I've mainly been doing the Facebook page, but I need to do the website. I've got it sort of ready to go.
Because you do know that will be the start of the change. When someone's got the guts to actually put it there.
Yeah, look,
The tenacity to leave it there.
well, I've got to be careful because if I push too hard, they'll shut the Facebook page down. I'll ban it and then everything's gone.
Yeah.
But that's where all the followers are. So once I launch the crowdfunding campaign, there's 4,000 supporters that will hopefully put money into the campaign to raise the money for the film.
Yeah, good. It needs to
But
be
I
done.
do need a website as well, so I
Yeah.
can send people to the website, to the Facebook,
Absolutely, Paul.
So that's the next thing.
Yeah.
I've got it set up. I just have to put pictures on it and
Do you
text.
notice something, Paul, that this has become an industry? Do you know what? If this was the tourism industry, whatever, do you realise this is now so commonplace? These terrible incidences. Do you realise that this has become too common? Do you know?
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And what's more frightening is Australia, which I thought was the lucky country, a good country, fair go for all, is worse than a lot of places around the world.
Yeah.
You know, it's corrupt. They cover information up. You can't get access to this. You don't get justice. People get fucked over. And it's Australia. It's my country.
I
and
know.
I'm like,
We don't want this to
this
happen.
is wrong.
Actually, we don't want it to happen, so we're speaking up. I think, though, when you speak up, you do put yourself up as a tall poppy, and you do put yourself up to be cut down. You know, I've always wondered whether I've done something. Oh, well, I mean, you know, like I know 1992, being the second person on the scene when Will Hodgman's uncle killed that woman. Yeah. Adrian said to me one day, he said, Mum, what have we done that they want me so badly? What have we done, Mum? What?
The scary thing is, you know, you're walking testament to the fact it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
It could happen to my son.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's that thing where you realise,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm almost expecting that if something happens where somebody I care about goes through the machine, the cogs in the machine,
Yeah.
that I'll know how to do what I'm doing now,
Yeah.
which is just go, well, no, stop right now before this goes any further. I need this, that, lawyer,
Absolutely.
bang, I want all the, you just got to go, and not give anyone the chance to just railroad you. Oh, sorry, we'll get back to you. No, I want it now.
Absolutely.
Now, and it's that thing where they'll get away with it if they can get away with it. But I think if too much pressure is brought to bear, then it's too hard. And then, and once you make people accountable,
I think this is the reason why I push this. I want them accountable for what they've done.
yeah,
Mrs. Maxwell, when she died, deserved to know the truth. And also the DPP is the actual speaker for the deceased. And he wants the truth spoken. He doesn't want fabrications. So I think that's what drives me more than anything.
what most people want is, yeah, look,
Honesty,
just, you know,
integrity.
all
from
the
a DPP.
questions to be answered thoroughly. And you want to feel like there's been a proper process.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, the deceased also deserves that process because they're not here to speak for themselves. It's like an animal. You know, they are voiceless. So it's up to us to speak for those animals. You know, they're small, they're, they're vulnerable. If the stronger can't speak for the vulnerable, what have we got?
Really go.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go and have a quick leave.
Yeah.
Do you need the loo or anything?
No, thanks. No. Oh, here we come with a lovely little...
Okay. I've got to do that again. Never seen it.
Do you need another drink?
Sorry?
Do you need another drink, Brian? Do you want
You
another
want
drink?
one,
No, you.
No, I'm alright.
Oh my God, you're over there doing the work. We're only yakking.
No, I'm sitting there watching it, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I'm trying not to
No,
move.
that's what we do.
I'm trying not to move.
No, you're going well, actually.
Yeah, but also too, it's good to be able to this is what Paul's good. It's like he's so easy to talk to. It's just like talking to your best friend, you know. And it needs to come out. And also too, I feel like it's out of me now. I don't have to carry it. Psychologically, this is fantastic.
Yeah, you got to let it out.
Yeah,
Yeah. You got no one to talk to as a bastard.
No.
If you want to ring up someone to spill your guts sort of thing,
Yeah.
or
Do you know, Brian, I've got myself a 1300 VTX sitting up there in the shed. She ain't coming out till I bring this kid home because I can't risk myself on the road. Imagine me splattered on the road and no one to fight for 80. Whereas if this document's made, I can go on the bike.
yeah,
First thing I want to do is go for a ride.
yeah.
Yeah. I just
But,
want to do things like that, but I've had to stop and say no because if I'm not around to speak for Adrian, who's going to speak for him?
Yeah.
Isn't that terrible?
It's a shitty world. I'm afraid it's doesn't get any better.
Yeah.
It's not going to get any better. There's some bastards trying to destroy everything right now.
Well, it's not the world I grew up in, and like being around in the
Nah.
60s and 70s, come
Nothing
on,
like
we had a different world. We did something wrong, the cop would kick our tail and send us home and tell our mum and dad all this.
Yeah, you get a whack across the back of the head. And
Yeah.
now
Or
it's
they
all
give you the
just,
driver's licence, 16, said, I've been watching you on the road for nearly 10 years, kids, so I know you can drive. And that's how I got my driver's licence. The cop said, I'll drive it down the road, I know you can drive. He said, you've been driving the motorbike on the road for years, you kids.
Yeah, I've been watching it for years. Yeah.
Country towns, that's good.
Oh, bloody fine. Yeah.
It's Santa Claus
Unbelievable.
with my Christmas presents. You're laughing, Paul, thank you.
gallows humour, I got plenty of
What have we got?
gallows humour.
Yeah, good. Yeah. I've got to find a laugh sometimes. Geez, I haven't laughed in ages. Oh, this is good. I just said to Brian, it's actually a relief. I've actually felt now I've transferred this.
I can feel it. You're just getting something off your chest,
Yeah.
and that's all you need to.
Yeah.
Just so you know, by the way,
It's somewhere else.
we're going to get this footage and do whatever we need to do with it when we
Yeah.
need to. But you'll
Yeah.
have you'll get all of this.
Yeah.
Just so
I'm just
you've
going
got
to
your
go
own
and
copy.
I'm just going to go now. I've got to go back and do an appeal. I want to concentrate on that now. So, and that which means I've got to find
I'm going
grounds.
to give you a battle plan,
Good.
a very simple battle plan.
Yes.
It'll
Yeah.
just be that.
Okay. I like your battle plans.
I've always said, don't panic, have a plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go, okay, this is the shit's all going down. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, and then do that, and that's the goal.
Yep. Yeah. And here's what we're
And
going to achieve.
and you focus,
I need to refocus.
and that's when your things start to work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I'd like you to do, without referring to any legal facts or anything like that, just tell me what you think happened that night.
Right. This was an intended, planned takeout by Ashley Stott on Adrian Smillie as punishment and payback for reporting him for killing Adrian's cat by putting it in the washing machine. What's happened is he's got Ben to do his dirty work, and Ben carried it out with his fist, but sadly Stott gave Ben a knife and Ben used it. Sadly, Adrian's got harmed. Ben has gone off and got further harmed by someone else, and that person clearly was the only person there left to do it was Ashley Stott. I believe the dog has attacked Ashley Stott, and those are the wounds on Ashley Stott. But Ashley Stott inside the house has got his bathroom, which lit up like a Christmas tree from luminol, which means he washed that knife, which means he wasn't injured. An injured person would not get up off the floor and go into the bathroom and wash a knife and place it back in front of a TV. So there was a bit of hiding up done. So, you know, look, one can only say that how it happened was these people were both conscious, and they would have had an opportunity to have told those policemen the story. I believe the police have withheld that. Totally. I believe they would have at least identified the person that stabbed each other.
What do you think Ashley Stott and Ben Maxwell would have been fighting about from the early evening right up till during the assault?
Right, Ben wasn't clean in the house, and it was well known Ashley wanted him gone, so they would have been fighting over that, those things, but also too over drugs. They were so loaded from 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They'd been on so much whiskey and stuff. They were just totally loaded. So look, I don't know, I've not been around alcohol and stuff like that to know the effects of these drugs and stuff, so, you know, the alcohol and stuff, so I can't say, but Ben had marijuana on him. Ben was wanting that to be gone and sold. Ben was angry, and Ben was brutal when he wanted to be too. So like everyone said, yeah, he's a bad dude, but we all liked him. So at the end of the day, you know, like, he had some bad ways. But I believe Ashley might be manipulating 1 week before he's cracking. Get up the back and sit with the meter, or over there, or use the Mackenzie rule. I said, Mackenzie rule you on? Oh, do you know what that is, he said. What a pig.
Look, I know judges get cranky. They hate it when people represent themselves. Generally because
Give us some legal
they
aid.
can't deal with lawyers because lawyers deal. But also
True.
because sometimes people like yourself are so determined that you'll go the extra
I
mile,
did.
and that's why they don't like it, because
I
it
pinpointed.
makes them work harder. They can't just go.
Let's wash the hands of this. Let's blood over that.
However, in this case, it's probably wise for you to engage a lawyer.
Yeah, I know. I'd
But
like
you just
one.
direct that lawyer and say, this is exactly what I want you to say and do, and this and that and this and
You're
that.
strong, Paul. Whereas I'm not like that. It's like I don't like to tell people what to do or how to do it. Their
Oh, you
job.
gotta.
Yeah, I know, and I've got to focus that it's actually my son's life every day that he's in there. Every day it's costing him time, costing him a son, costing him risk. It's the risk, and I've just got to focus on that and get a.
There is a time limit.
Yeah, there is definitely.
Yeah, any time.
Tell me what happened to Ben Maxwell's cross pit bull terrier or pit bull dog.
Right. Well, that was actually found at the Burnie Pound. It had been kept there since the evening of 25th of the 12th, which was Christmas Eve. Christmas Day Eve, and it was then relocated to a family member, they thought, and they still think that to this day. However, Ulverston being small, we knew each other. I actually worked with the family before. I rang up the lady and said, look, can I have Ben's dad's number? I got Ben's dad's number and spoke to him and said, did you allocate the dog to someone else? And he went, oh, no. A friend rang up and said that he wanted Ben's dog. And he said, yes, go and get it. So I did confirm it, and it was someone that picked up that dog, and it was never a family member. So it was a friend. So it was not what the pound thought, but it's not what Mr. Maxwell thought either, or otherwise they would never have let that dog go, because Ben loved his dog, and that dog loved Ben. So
And what happened to the dog?
it was found on the 8th of January with 14 stab wounds on it at the RSPCA Centre at Sprayton on a slab. The lady who was the second port of call, if a dog's missing, apparently the council have the owner and then someone to phone if the owner's not available. Well, they phoned this lady up and said, look, the dog's been found, it is deceased, please come and identify the dog because we can't get the owner, clearly the owner's deceased. She went out, she identified that dog as Ben's dog. So,
Was it ever followed up as to who killed the dog, stabbed the dog?
no, never, no. In fact, the police went out of their way to keep the dog out of the affidavits. However, there is a detective Lloyd who said a white dog, twang. I realised then Ben's dog was there, and that's the only reason I knew it was. In his affidavit was one mention of the dog. That's it. The rest of the people never even mentioned the dog.
Is there any way to get a record of who it was that picked the dog up in the first place?
Yeah, it would be nice to know, wouldn't it? Isn't it funny? But Ashley Stock got out of hospital on the 6th of January. How coincidental is that? The dog didn't go any time in between that, and if a friend wanted it, they would have gone straight and got Ben's dog. They knew how much Ben loved that dog. They would never have left it in the pound, but, well, there you go, we've got the dates and, draw a conclusion from that, and I've drawn mine, and I know who did it. The same person who put those wounds into Ben, obviously got bitten and has gone and done payback on the dog. So, we've got a sick person who can do this.
Where is Ashley Stott now, and what's happened with him?
Right, Ashley Stott has been living in Penguin. Up until about 2 weeks ago, he's gone undercover now. He's absolutely done a runner.
You mentioned a while ago that when you were dealing with your son inside Risdon Prison, that there was some confusion about his mental state and the determinations made by medical professionals who had examined him.
Mr. Minahan and Dr. Ball, yes.
What happened in that regard where you found out that there had been some form of communication between the justice who heard the case and the doctor who had dealings with your son.
Right, and this is so crucial in its entirety that this actually be spoken of, because how many other people has this happened to? Adrian's been in prison and he hasn't coped. As I said, he's suicided 4 times, and the last time he wasn't expected to live. So me stabilising him emotionally and knowing he wasn't alone with this was important. So I visited him 3 times a week to stabilise him, and I kept him up to date with everything I did. I never excluded him from any of his appeal. He was totally engaged in the appeal with me, because I believe in making informed choices and respecting people. So to respect my son, and he'd had no respect, I was continuously sending documents into him, just sending general questions in relation to the situation into him, so he felt empowered. But a doctor apparently, when I was doing the appeal, decided to go down into that prison and tell Adrian he didn't have an appeal. So I kept thinking, Adrian, why are you saying this? And I was questioning Adrian. It's like, what are you saying, Adrian? This doesn't sound right. No doctor's going to do that, Adi. I said, Adi, Adi, they wouldn't do that. Adi, we're right, we'll get there. And I kept trying to support him. Anyway, Adrian was moved out of the prison. He was moved up to the William Lopez Centre, and this would have happened in the October, just prior to, we'd had our hearing, but we had no decision from the appeal. So what happened was they wouldn't let me see Adrian. Week 1, week 2, I'd go for the visit. No, you can't have it. Week 3, no, you can't have it. Anyway, on the 4th one, I went, no, this is not right. Anyway, this man came out of the door and said, oh, are you Miss Crack? I said, yes. And he said, you're Adrian Smillie's mother? I said, yes. He said, Adrian's a very sick man, so we've got him here now for the rest of his natural life. I went, excuse me? You can't do that. I said, it was 23 for murder. You can't take the rest of his life, mate. What are you on about? And he said, oh, no, Adrian has not coped very well with prison, and we need to stabilise him, and we need to, get him better. And all this, and I went, well, he was fine. I visited him just before you brought him here, and he was absolutely fine. What's going on? And he said, oh, well, Adrian's appeal has failed. Therefore, we've got going to keep him here with us. I went, no, you're not. And I said, and I went, oh my God. I said, oh my God, you're the doctor. So it is true, you're the doctor who was going down telling my son that he didn't have an appeal. He went, yes. And I went, oh my God, and you know about this appeal decision? I went, oh my God, no. I went, you've colluded. I said, oh my God, you've just involved yourself in my son's legal case. You've taken away my son's right to his due process. And he just looked at me blank, and I went, oh my God, you have colluded with Chief Justice Alan Blow, haven't you? You've colluded to get my son up here so that this appeal decision doesn't have to be delivered. I went, oh my God, you can't do that. And he just looked at me blank, and I went, you get and you sack the person who's been going to that court and getting this information, you sack him. And that ended our conversation. But I got home and was thinking about it. I wanted another meeting with this man. And so I rang up and I said, oh, look, I've just had a meeting this afternoon with Dr. Ball. I would like another meeting with him, please. And she said, oh, he's not available. He's not here. And I went, oh, okay, I'll ring him tomorrow. I rang the next day, which was the Wednesday, and I said, can I speak to, please have a meeting with Dr. Ball. I want to come in and see him and have another meeting as soon as possible, please. They went, oh, he's not here. He's on holidays. So, fair enough, doctors go on holidays. But I rang back and I said, oh, look, excuse me, dear, look, what day is he due back? Can I please book him straight away for an appointment with him on his first day back? And she said, oh, no, he's resigned. He's not here anymore. He's gone, just like that. So that ended that. But I got home, that was Wednesday. On the Thursday, I had a text message from the court to be in there. The appeal decision was coming down, and that was on Friday afternoon. The timing of it, because I called Dr. Ball out, meant Chief Justice Alan Blow had to bring that decision down. Do you know, I believe they put him in there to stop the appeal decision coming through and to take away Adrian's process of that appeal. I seriously do.
So you could then say that what you've discovered was that there was a definite collusion between the medical head at the Willie Lopez Centre, which is the psychiatric unit within the Risdon Hospital,
Absolutely.
and the Chief Justice, who was about to make a determination regarding Adrian's appeal.
Yes, and I believe that one of the judges on the appeal would have found that there was not enough evidence to charge my son, because he had a conversation in front of us at one of the when we were presenting our appeal, and the judge absolutely crucified the prosecutor and it said, now explain how you got murder on this man. And he just stuttered and stammered, and he went, oh, well, you're not going to answer that. Well, how did you get GBH on this man? And Tony Jacobs just stuttered and stammered again, and he went, oh, you're not going to answer that either, whatever, you know. So it was Justice Pearce, and he was quite strong, and I believe his decision would have been, and we don't have those documents, we weren't given them. I put that in front of a 3-judge panel, not 1-judge panel, 3. And I expected 3 decisions to be brought down from those panels. Instead, it was only Chief Justice Blow. And on the Friday afternoon, we turned up. Chief Justice Blow come in and said, are you Adrian Smillie? Adrian Wayne Smillie? And he said, yes. He said, appeal dismissed, clunk, court adjourned. And he handed the document out to the media. My son had to go back to that back to that mental health system, not knowing why his appeal had failed. The hospital rendered him unconscious for nearly 5-6 days. I'd ring up and he wasn't conscious. They would just fob me off, and I'd ask and ask again, can I speak to Adrian, please, can I speak to Adrian? And you'd hear Adrian in the background, oh no. And they'd say, oh, do you want to talk to your mum? Oh no. He really had bottomed out. But he said he was so heavily drugged straight after that. And that may have been for the shock factor. There may be a reason for that.
Just get some of the names of those people.
Yes.
So the justice who you felt basically castigated the prosecution for coming up with a murder charge. What was his name?
That was Justice Pearce. Justice Pearce.
And the prosecutor?
Was DPP Anthony Jacobs.
On the basis of that, do you feel that that has opened the door for a legitimate second appeal, given that one of the justices has questioned the murder charge in the first instance?
Yes, but because we were never given his decision, that's been withheld from us. And that's why I requested a 3-judge panel, because I didn't want to just trust one judge. I don't trust him after what I've seen at the trial. It was terrible.
Prior to...
Yeah, well, slice us fine.
What was it?
It's a kilometre long, man.
Big trade.
Oh, okay, it's the good one. But Paul, you're fading. Are you okay?
Still
fine.
trying.
You sure? Where did you get the bloody energy from for this? But isn't it good? He's just so switched on. You know, what's castigated mean? Sorry, I was going to ask.
Castigated means
I love it.
naughty boy.
Yeah, thank you. I love the word.
Well, we don't like Jason freeze their arse off, didn't
Yeah.
we? For about 12, 14 hours or something.
Yeah, warm up, Paul. You've got the flu coming on.
I tell you what, I'm 53 years old. When it comes to creating, it's like putting a shot in my arm.
Yeah, I know.
It wakes me up.
But just, you know, it's just so fantastic. Do you notice how freely I can speak to you? Do you know how many times I've gone and yelled this down the river to get this out of me? You know, do you know what?
You know, I think
Look
you've
at
got
it.
a really strong way forward here. I really do.
Yeah. Thank you for listening.
If it's done the right way,
Yeah.
and you kick up enough stink,
Yeah. Thank you for saying
then
that.
you'll probably put them in a situation where they'll deal. Where you say, "Listen, you let him out, and I'll walk away, and we'll be quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You keep him in, and I'll bury you."
Yeah. Yeah. Actually,
And you've got to track down that doctor too, who's resigned.
he's disappeared. I've
What
tried.
about selling? Oh, no.
Yeah. Do you know what I've tried, Paul?
Keep trying.
I think he's gone to Barbados.
Interesting. He
probably went on the
thought,
form.
"Fuck, I'm just..."
But why? But why all of a sudden? And you should have thought, oh, I wished I could paint his face. I called him out. This dumb mum.
Okay, so let's go back again to where we were before.
Yeah.
So Justice Alan Blow summarily dismissed the appeal
Yes.
as a singular justice making the determination after you'd made a request for a 3-panel justice
that's correct.
determination. Did he give any preamble whatsoever, any discussion, any inclination to at least, reconsider things, or was it straight out
No.
appeal dismissed?
It's absolutely as I said it. It would have taken all of probably 40 seconds. It was so bad, even the nurses that came with Adrian said they were shocked at how they treated Adrian. They were horrified. They recorded it, that he'd been put through such a bad situation on that Friday afternoon that they had medicated him highly because they felt he went into shock. And I was in shock too, and to see the poor kid, was just gutted. We had such faith in Justice Pearce. He actually gave us hope. When I seen him talking to the prosecutor like that, I felt there was he was answerable to someone. The prosecutor was answerable to a judge in the correct way. But I think one judge overrode another judge. And I think that's called bullying, if that's happening in the schoolyard.
Did you have any information provided to you about the legitimacy of that decision to just summarily dismiss the appeal? For instance, I know that in some legal cases you're entitled to ask for what they call written reason. In other words, they have to lay down a reason why they made that determination. Did anybody say to you or give you information to say, look, if you're not happy with this dismissal, you can request this or ask that or do this?
No, what happened was I went into the registry office the Registrar's office at the Supreme Court on the Monday and got that, and I delivered one to the prison to Adrian myself. Now, if we look at the tactic of Chief Justice Alan Blow, he passed a new law, I think it was the 16th of July, to stop any mother actually representing or advocating for a person or a son or a family member, and he passed that law. Will Hodgman signed off, and I believe it was the 16th of July. Only weeks. We were there in the August.
So this is the Premier of Tasmania,
Yes.
Will Hodgman,
Yes, he
has
signed
approved the law, the legislation,
Absolutely, he signed
to
off.
prevent
A mother speaking for a son. Yep. Now, considering, and I had to look at the situation, Adrian had his head bashed in. He has remember when I lodged the appeal, he was put in solitary confinement for 3 to 4 months. I think it was 4 months. So he had problems, he couldn't stand the light. He'd had no communications. We were segregated off. I only had 1 visit a week, not 3. So emotionally he'd gone downhill. So he'd been treated really badly because I lodged an appeal. So we'd already been punished. Will Hodgman then went in and signed that document on the 16th of July, which meant I couldn't speak for Adrian. As harmed as he was not given 1 cent of taxpayers' legal aid. He was stopped. And then he was stopped the appeal by pulling this new law down. So quickly did he pass it. I was shocked. And then here we are in court, and Chief Justice Blow is sticking his boots into me for thinking I could represent my son, and told me I had no Australian human rights to even advocate for my son. And I said, excuse me, Your Honour, but how is this the case when we see people from overseas all the time, and yet I'm a taxpayer and we have not had 1 cent of taxpayers' money, and yet you can't even let me speak for my son or advocate for my son? And he said, Miss Crack, take it to the federal government, not my problem. Get up the back and sit where the media is, sit over there, or do the Mackenzie rule. I said, Your Honour, I'll take the Mackenzie rule. And he said, oh, do you know what that is? I went, excuse me, yes, I do, Your Honour. And also too, being a school teacher, I have students, some have lesser abilities to read, so you use more pictures and stuff for the learning process. I'd already prepared the photographs that you've seen tonight with knife 77 matching wound 8 and new 9. And wound 9. Adrian spoke to that about the judges. Adrian then spoke with me beside him, and he was talking about the knife, so I wrote knife 77. That's all I could do, so that there was a reference. So as Adrian was speaking, I was giving and writing down the reference numbers for Adrian to convey to the judge. So he did take them outside and he did look at them with the other 3 judges. Now, however, only a day prior to that, Chief Justice Alan Blow sent a letter to me saying any evidence I give him on that day would be tendered into evidence. Do you know what? Chief Justice Blow took those documents off Adrian, which was valid proof of who did the wounding, and then did not put them in as evidence. They were never in as evidence in the appeal. They were omitted. So he's done.
Let's say that again. So, tell me what Justice Blow did to contravene legal process in regards to the tendering of evidence.
Right. It was Mr. Doyle, the Secretary for Chief Justice Blow, wrote to me and said any documents put into evidence would be accepted. He sent me an email saying that. However, on the day, he talked to Adrian, they were given the documents, and they were so specific to the grounds of appeal, but by photograph. There was analysis done of many things, like the bathroom, for example. The crime scene of Unit 3 was all set up as one big A3 document and was handed in colour to the judge, for example. There was the wounds on Mr. Ben Maxwell, with identifying the 4 wounds that had penetrated the lungs, and the explanation for the 3 wounds into the right lung. But we couldn't explain the left lung at that point, so we accepted that and said that we can't explain that, Your Honour. So that was all done. So there was 3 death wounds that were done by someone else, by scissors and by another knife 77. There's the wound, Your Honour, and 3 are in one lung. It was so clear. But no, he didn't tender those documents. They were never accepted as evidence.
So forensics evidence that basically clearly defined the fatal strikes on Ben Maxwell from what seemed to be different weapons, scissors, a knife, and perhaps a different type of knife, were not permissible as evidence on the orders of Chief Justice Blow.
Yes. Irrespective of the guarantee he'd give only days before that. So he'd give us a false promise. It's disgusting.
Tell me about some of the treatment that Adrian has suffered since his incarceration, and
Adrian's
your concerns.
Been persecuted so badly. This is a man who clearly was in the drug world. You know, I'm not making any comments, any aspersions. Clearly, he had needle track wounds. Please, that was Ben's choice. If Ben chose not to respect his life, that's Ben's choice. I'm not making a comment on that. But I'm looking at a boy who chose to have a daughter, a family, and buy cars for his family, buy Christmas presents for children. He respected his life. But here we go, we've got a situation of where Ben's gone in and he's done something absolutely quite, look, he was off the planet, end of story. And to have to deal with it and to have to see it in this sequence and to have to look at it in that way is virtually how we're going to have to look at it to come to sort of any points where we can continue, you know, where we can look at things that night, you know.
I guess what I'm asking you is, has Adrian sustained, has Adrian sustained any abuse or violence or injuries in prison?
He has. He's been raped numerous times. He's been held down and raped. He's had his eye half cut out. They photographed it and sent it on Facebook to me. How do you get a picture out of the prison? Lord only knows. But they sent it to my Facebook. But it was just a picture and I'd just done a screenshot going, oh, that's awful. When I went in to see my son, there he was, and there was the eye, and I went, oh my God, that's you. Oh my God. And he said, oh, my mum, don't say nothing. I said, what the hell happened? He said, don't talk about it, because in there's a code of silence. You don't say nothing, because if you squeal on this one, they get you worse the next time. So, and there's been one hit on him on a Sunday night that I actually was told of. I travelled to Devonport. I spoke to the man who'd actually told one of my old school friends that it was going to happen. I travelled to Devonport and I sat with this man, and he admitted to his crimes and he told me it was happening. He actually in the end called it off once I showed him the document, which was knife 77 matching wound 8 and 9. Why is it that everyone can see that that knife matches the wound, including the judge that I went to for the directions hearing? She ordered the DPP, Anthony Jacobs, to cooperate with me once she's seen that picture, but before that she was resisting. But once she's seen that picture, she went, no, Mr. Jacobs, you cooperate with this woman. And after that, she met me over at the prosecutor's office. She came with me. She was there beside me all the time. I thought that was really lovely to support me in that way. So I've had some good help. But no, Adrian's been raped. He's been kicked, punched, stabbed. He told me the other day they make shanks out of the pencil sharpeners. So he's scared he's going to get one of them through him. And this is how they're doing it. So...
was there some discussion about him being castrated?
Yes, Adrian has told me there is no more children in the family, and he's told me never to expect any more grandchildren. He told me that when he was up at the William Lopez Centre, they did surgery on him, and he said, "Mum, I'm not a man anymore." He said they're gone, and he said, "I know there's been surgery," and he said, and I said, "Well, son, they didn't let me see you for nearly 3 weeks." And I said, when they got you, they did have you on a lifetime order to keep you in a mental institution. They never suspected that I was going to go full bore and go to the guardianship board, talk to Dr. Ball and say, "Hey, mate, you think you're doing this, I'll get back to Canberra again." And I already took mental health services to Canberra. I'd already spoken with Canberra, and I already got documentation on John Loudon in regards to a comment by Paula Rintel. Paula Rintel admitted to organising Adrian to do a crime with John Loudon so that John Loudon could put Adrian in a prison to get mental help. Hello, where do they get to control my son's life? Where do they get to say he's mentally ill? He's a traumatised child from what happened in his childhood. He's a traumatised young man because of what happened in his childhood. They need to acknowledge, and I wanted them to acknowledge, he's not mentally ill, he's a very traumatised child, which I believe there's been physiological changes in, not psychological. We've got depression, we've got all that, but that's an effect of trauma. And I want them to recognise that.
Was any of his childhood trauma brought up in the trial when he was found guilty?
Nothing. No, they talked about this report of where Adrian had abused Miss Rintel, and he got an AVO put on him, and Adrian had a hard childhood. Look, Adrian didn't have a hard childhood. We were good parents, no drinking, no smoking. We didn't do that to our children. We went camping every weekend. We were good parents. My husband and I worked all the time, so what? Families do that. You have high mortgages. You just do the work. Let's get real. Families do that every day of the week here. But Adrian's trauma had come, and I didn't know till he was 26 that the trauma had happened at 12. Because if I'm not told, how does a mother know? I knew there was warning signs. I knew I had to help him. But I didn't know how or what I was really dealing with. But I knew it was serious because the suicides were so consistent and so terrible.
And this was never brought up in trial?
No.
That he had a prior history of sexual abuse?
No, it wasn't at all. In fact, it's totally been covered up by mental health services. They have a way of degrading me, and they go to people and say, "Oh, but she's mentally ill." I'm called a psycho by the cops down there. No, I'm not. I'm a determined mum to get the truth. And it shouldn't be my job to go out and do the investigation that the police should be doing, by the way. So if I'm seeming rather angry at that, yes, I am, because they should be doing their job. They should never have done this. Also, too, what they don't realise, by these police officers covering up, doing what they did for the paramedic, they've just pulled down a whole police force's reputation. That paramedic should have owned up and said, "We're under-resourced. The dog attacked me. I've accidentally bumped this man. I've had an accident. He's an ice addict. He was arcing up at me." You know what? Where's the society would have understood and went, "Oh, that poor paramedic, what was he dealing with?" That would have been called a workplace incident, investigated, and they probably would have got more staff on, through these things. But it was covered up. So all the good police in Tasmania are being pulled down by bad ones, and the morale must be down in Tasmania. You can't tell me that there's good policemen sitting by watching this. Actually, yes, there is. So the morale must be down.
Got two final questions.
Yep.
You've been battling to
Yeah.
save your son and free your
Yep.
son for
Yep.
6.5 years.
Yep.
Just tell me about your feelings.
I am so exhausted. I'm so exhausted. But every day I have to wake up and wonder whether I've got a son. There's 680 other mothers with sons in that prison that are obviously waking up the same. And the whole fact of the matter is that every day that he's in there, he's not out making other grandkids for me, and they've stolen my life, they've stolen his life. It's horrible. And what's worse is, you know, like having to live like this with no money, and I lost my job, so teaching, so like, you look at all that, and I'm asking him to trust in me, but there must be times that I mustn't be looking like his rock. Do you know what I mean? So it must be so hard on him. But he saved his life that night because another man didn't respect his. He saved his life because he had a child and he respected his life. But you know what? They've put him right back in the situation he was in that night, having to front a knife in that prison whenever these other people choose to use a knife on him. How can they do that? They've taken him out of one incident and they've put him in the same incident 24 hours a day. The risk of being knifed again is totally always there on this kid. How can they do this? But
Is
they've
there
done it.
any independent welfare group that are able to come in there to check on him, to make sure he's safe? Have the prison responded to your concerns about his literal safety?
Actually, the prison, when I did the appeal, called me a security risk. However, with this last incident where I did believe he was coming out, I did give him a letter saying, this letter is to inform you, you have an innocent inmate and that nothing's to happen to him because he's innocent. And so that's the letter I took in, and I spoke to the head of security and I went, mate, he's coming out and he's not to be touched. So you make sure no one goes in there and touches him, because guess what? You know, I still have a son to live and work for and to keep this going for. The moment anything happens to him or if he goes, I've got nothing, and I would just break. And I'm telling you, look, I will be so angry at the system. I will be so angry at these people who have betrayed my belief in the judicial system. And I will be so angry that I'm sorry, I'm not letting my son die in prison. End of story. So the battle is on, and I won't stop till I get his innocence proven. But my fear is, like he said, he's going to come out in a body bag, and he believes that too, and I fear that. So sadly, that's our situation. And what wouldn't everyone in this whole of Australia do today to save their child's life tomorrow? And that's the question these people out there have got to ask themselves. They sit back in judgment, they sit back in courts, they sit back with their children tucking them into bed, but what they're asking me to do is to live today wondering whether I have a son tomorrow. And that's not fair. So that's the way I see it.
What's wrong with Tasmania?
It's corrupt. It's as corrupt as. Can I tell you what is wrong with Tasmania? That island stinks. That's the island I grew up on and loved. How many people have left Tasmania saying what I'm just saying? Look at that lovely lady who did Port Arthur, Wendy Skerr. She said the same thing, and I was heartbroken for her. Now, to hear she's passed over without seeing anyone listen to her. If anyone had listened to her, they would have turned that key on Martin Bryan and let him out. Because what they did to Martin Bryan is what they tried to do to my son. They've taken a lifetime order over Martin Bryan, and they've tried to take a lifetime order over my son, who was innocent, right? And I'm telling you, I'm sorry, I seen the coefficient correlation of their agendas, and I did not like it. To me, they have patterns of behaviour. The judicial system has patterns of behaviour. to cover up. The police have patterns of behaviour and they need to be exposed. Tasmania needs a royal commission. Everyone's case is an individual case and needs to be heard. It would take 3 years to clean Tassie's royal commission up for judicial misconduct. It'd be a 3-year case. Minimum, it's that dirty. It's corrupt. It's a drug state. People just don't have any aspiration or hope. It's like as if there's a dark cloud over Tassie. And I've always said that. There's a real dark cloud over Tassie. But for people in these places of trust, I wrote to Chief Justice Alan Bligh and said, you are the last holder of the judicial process in Tasmania. You are the last beholder of truth, and I implore you to look for the truth and to find the truth and to appeal, to see my appeal was based on truth, and to bring back a verdict for that boy, to release him to go back to his child. Where's the man's heart? Where's the man's integrity? Where's Chief Justice Alan Bligh's integrity? Where is it? God, no knife. There is no knife with DNA on it of my son. With all those knives, where is the knife they stabbed my son with? Come on, bring it up. Nah, it's corrupt. It's stench. It stinks. It's stenchful. It's disgusting. And I can tell you what they say about tourism in Tassie, mate. If you knew where you couldn't go in Tassie, you wouldn't even go to Tassie. Yeah.
I think we'll leave it here.
Thank you.
Yeah, God's side of the crime.
Sorry, what?
You all right?
Yeah, absolutely. Bastard.
Well done.
Thank you. Oh, we'll get the
We'll get
bastard.
them.
Yeah,
Very powerful story.
thank you.
Sorry.
I think I overdid the stench. I'm probably a bit angry.
No, not at all. Very
It's a real
powerful.
stench. I'm sorry. But that's how I feel, and this is what I sit in the car and say, and that's why I explain. It's like, for fuck's sake.
Well, the anger's good because it fuels you.
Yeah.
But yeah, you are going to have to look after yourself as well, because you can't
It's
fight
there
the
now.
battle if you're weak. So
Well,
getting
it's
strong.
actually there now. It's not in here.
This
You
is
know,
a
Paul?
beginning.
It's a good beginning. Do you know what I always said? Why can't I just sit and give this to someone? Why can't I just get this out of me?
Thanks, B.
Yeah, no, thanks, bro. You poor man, look at
More
you.
sound on it, more cards.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Jeez.
get there, and it's bloody hard to get from
Yeah.
How long did we film for? We've been going for
3 hours.
3
Well,
hours.
we really?
So I think we've
It's just
covered
over
everything. Is there
2.5
anything?
hours.
Absolutely no. Can I tell you?